Welcome everyone to From Awareness to Action, what every job coach should know about neuro-inclusive hiring. I am so excited about this topic. This is a collaboration with the Florida Center for Inclusive Communities and Florida APSE. Florida APSE is the Florida chapter of the Association for Persons Supporting Employment First, the Florida chapter. It's the only national membership organization to focus exclusively on inclusive employment and career advancement opportunities for individuals with disabilities. The Florida Center for Inclusive Communities at the University of South Florida was established as a UCED, which is a University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, in October 2005. Through the leadership in research and evaluation, theory, policy, capacity building, and practice, FCIC is committed to developing a range of supports and services in the areas of community supports, early childhood, education, employment, health, and interdisciplinary training. Our speaker today is Sylvia Gill. She is president and founder of Neuro Consulting Solutions, where she builds the practice out of her conviction that employers could create environments designed to promote the well-being and productivity of all by bringing evidence-based awareness and supports to an underserved population. Before training and consultation for C-suite executives in top Fortune 500 companies, Sylvia began her career as a special education teacher, where she fostered her passion and honed her skills for building effective student support. These skills were further developed through her time working in a nonprofit focused on neurodivergent individuals and building out inclusive programming in local businesses. In addition, she partners with J.P. Morgan Chase to expand financial literacy programs to the neurodivergent community. She received her master's degree in special education from the Florida International University, having worked with nonprofits and individual families to Fortune 500 companies and premier academic institutions. Sylvia understands the benefits companies and communities stand to gain by accommodating and embracing the neurodiverse community. Welcome, Sylvia.
It would really help if I would unmute myself. So there was, it's not a Microsoft Teams meeting without muting yourself as you start talking. So thank you, Denise, for that introduction, and welcome everybody. Thank you for being with us on a Friday morning. I know you just want to do trainings this early. All right, I'm going to start sharing my screen, and then Denise, you can let me know if I do that correctly, hopefully. All right, are you able to see the presentation? Awesome.
Yes.
So thank you again. My name is Sylvia Gill, and what we're really going to be covering today is that from awareness to action piece. I think a lot of us that are probably on here already know the value, know the importance of that employment. But what we really want to start looking at is what are those actionable steps? What are those modern strategies so that we can elevate job coach training? Because when we support the way job coaches train and learn, then we really can support our clients in that neuro-inclusive hiring practice. A lot of the strategies we're going to give, you'll be able to apply like immediately. So that's really the big part of this training. So as Denise mentioned, my name is Sylvia Gill. I am the founder of Neuro Consulting Solutions. I really started my career, my passion as an educator, really understanding the way our kids learn, applying our strategies to really make sure, are we teaching to the way students are learning? And that really translates even as we're adults. It translates for us. You know, sometimes when we're doing courses and trainings and things like that, we're not really learning the way that we learn. So it's really how are we adapting these skills? And that's what really brought me to open up NCS. I have been in the field for over 20 years. So not only am I a professional, but I'm a proud parent of a daughter on the spectrum. So it's really incredible kind of being in this industry, learning about it, and then going on the other side and then becoming a parent. So it really shifts that perspective. And so who are we at Neuro Consulting Solutions? As Denise had mentioned, I started my career in that special education field. And then I started working at a nonprofit where what I really noticed was seeing so many amazing providers doing incredible work, but not having the time to build out these visual supports, to build out the curriculum development. Like, we all know how challenging it is delivering service, but then trying to be innovative and build out programs or build out the workplace supports that are necessary. And that's really what made me start this. And so going into NCS, we really partner with nonprofit agencies, program developments to create the curriculums and programs so that these agencies can then deliver the best service. So that really is a lot that we do. We also do learning and development, whether that's onboarding for your own agencies or helping onboard our adults into the workplace. We create those systems, those training guides, all through visuals. So you're going to see so many visuals and how we transfer just your typical presentations with text and then shifting it, utilizing those visual supports. So we create those learning and development as well, and then providing those consultative services. So really looking at where are agencies, where are those gaps, and then how do we develop the programs and supports necessary to elevate those services. So what we're going to be covering today is kind of this really 5-part series. First is understanding the theory behind designing. And when we talk about kind of those neuro-inclusive practices, it all starts with the why. You know, why are we here? Not just, oh, I need to get my CEU credits, but whenever we do trainings, we need to understand the theory and the why behind it. And this is going to really shift the way you are training, onboarding staff, and then helping onboard your clients. We're going to talk about what that systemic onboarding looks like. How do we build that into practice and into place? And then we're going to talk about technology. I know everybody with AI and you're so bombarded with all of these supports, but we can really use and leverage the technology to elevate what you're doing, right? We don't have to be scared of it, but we have to know how to work it and how to use it and use it correctly. And it's not a replacement, but it really can enhance and make your lives a little bit easier. Then we'll talk about utilizing those natural supports and how do we place those visuals, and then looking at expanding your agency. So as you look into building out your systems, then how do we expand? And then we'll open it up for questions. So let's first kind of dive into the theory. So the why. So if I ask all of you, and yes, this is going to be a little of an interactive piece, we're going to use the chat here. If I ask you, hey, I need you to build this cube, how would you prefer to learn how to build that? Would you rather, 1, watch a video, 2, kind of have those step-by-step instructions, 3, a live demonstration, or 4, instruction in text? So if you can use the chat, or if you don't want to participate, but I want you to think about it. What are some of the ways that you would best learn if I asked you to build this cube? Or you can raise your hand. All right, thank you, Bianca. Number 3, a live demonstration. Anybody else? More 3s. 1 or 2 videos, 2, 3s, yes. 1 or 3. 1 or 3 videos. Awesome. 1. Here's what I noticed, and usually I do this question. All of them, it's listed. Yes, right? All of them. And I love that you said that. Priscilla says all of them. Yes. When I learn new information, if I am building a program, if I am training an adult to work in the workplace, if I am onboarding job coaches, whenever we are presenting information, we typically should be presenting in all 4 formats. But the reality is we're mostly presenting in instructional text. And notice in the chat, nobody picked instructional text. But time and time again, when I say, hey, what's your system? What's your protocols? What is it that, or the employee handbook? Who has actually read their employee handbook? If it looks like it's just instructional text, I guarantee probably none of your staff is reading it. Okay. Or if I give this to my client, most likely they're not even looking at it and it's not effective. Okay. And so that's what I want you to kind of shift. And I want you to think of, how is information typically presented to you and how are you presenting it to your client? And usually when we look at it, it's typically instructional text rather than adding those videos, those visuals, those step-by-step, even though all of you chose 1, 2, or 3. All right. And so what we want to do is really support the learning styles. As educators, when we think of, I'm sure a lot of you have learned, oh, we all learn differently, or there's different learning styles, but it tends to fade as we get older. Mostly people are relying on that text to get information across, but we really want to support that learning style, whether it's auditory, right? Some of you prefer to listen. Some of you may prefer to use those visual supports, or that demonstration, that kinesthetic process. So as you age, it doesn't change. Those adult learning principles and our learning styles do not change. And so we really want to make sure, are we incorporating in our training materials, in onboarding job coaches or anything like that, are we incorporating these different types of learning styles? And learning styles and the power of visuals, right? So when we utilize visual supports, it really supports all learning styles. Its effective training programs should use a blend of those different learning styles to really meet the diverse needs of all learners. Again, whether you're the employee or whether you are, providing that support to a client. And really setting the standard. So provide options so adult learners don't need to ask for accommodations. I think for a lot of the times, if we build these supports, if we have these structured systems in place, we may not need to ask so much for those accommodations and supports because they're naturally built in there into your environment. And so we have to tap into those adult learning, what motivates me, right? What motivates me to be here? What motivates us to continue to learn and excel in the work that we do? So we have to first look at it is when we're building these training programs, or we're really on that, thinking of that onboarding process for our adults, for ourselves, we have to make it problem-centered. All right, we'll dive deep into each of those. We want to involve adult learners. You want to really reflect on the learner's experience, and then you want to make it relevant, right? So how does this training, how does this, you being here, how does this really impact your life? That's how we make these trainings effective. And so looking at the principle, when I make it problem-centered, learning is problem-centered instead of content-oriented, okay? You are here because you might want to learn something that's going to help you solve a problem. If I was doing a presentation on like science and chemistry, it's probably relevant to you. So it doesn't really make it effective, and you're going to forget everything that I say. So I really want to make sure when I'm designing something, we're training, it's that problem-centered and it's practical. They can use that awareness to action, right? There's those actionable items that apply to my day-to-day. We want to involve the adult learner. So adults need to be involved in the planning, evaluation of your learning experience. So if I'm creating a training program, we really want to understand what are the specific needs of the employees, the staff, the clients, and then build around that. Ask them, especially those that are the boots on the ground, right? You're the one that's there. And when I see a training that is so irrelevant to what's the practical or what I'm doing, I check out. So we really want to make sure, are these training tools really embedded in my own personal experience and what's actually happening? And then really reflecting on their lived experience. So what, we always talk about, like, when we teach laundry, oh, when I put a red sock into the whites and everything turned pink, we can really reflect on some of the mistakes that we've made, whether that's on the job, and then teaching through those challenges. So using your lived experience to say, hey, I've done that. I've totally messed up this form. Here's the right way to do it. And then relevance and impact to your lives. So am I tapping to your passion? Am I tapping into what's relatable and meaningful? So when we do these trainings, when we talk about, we're building these inclusive practices, is this relevant to them? And so how does that apply? So as you're designing these things, as you're building out training programs and creating those inclusive practice models, we really want to link training and visuals to real life situations and those tasks, right? Share those learning goals. Involve adult learners. So ask them, hey, what was your experience like? What happened? Take pictures of what it is that's happening in the field and then applying it into your training programs. That way you can customize goals, trainings, and visuals. Those surveys are great, right? Denise even shared, hey, we're going to take a survey after this. And the reason why we want to take surveys is so that can we build things to what our audience needs? So making sure we're incorporating your own lived experience to really mold what other trainings are we going to then start giving, and making sure that this is relevant. right? So have learners create that wish list of visuals or new skills and then applying it to your toolkit. And I think this is really powerful. When we talk about visuals, research is back that adults retain 65% of visual content versus 10% spoken. That's huge. If I were to give this training with no presentation and no visuals, you're only going to retain about 10% of what I actually say. But the fact that we can incorporate a lot of visual supports, you'll then retain 65%. And we know that really by utilizing your visual supports, it supports all learning styles. Whether you are, you're listening, you're hearing, you have to demonstrate and live model, you're going to support those learning styles. We're going to reduce errors. There are so many times we go into workplaces and I ask 5 people to do the same task. And I'm sure you can imagine how many variations of that task do I get? I get 5, right? Everyone's doing something different. And then the quality starts to decrease. Overcome common barriers. We want to boost new employee retention. Think of yourself as if you've been onboarded into a new job. If you have no idea what you're doing and there's no direction, what am I doing here? Or it feels very overwhelming. So imagine our clients, how they feel. Cost-effective training. So if we have these systems in place, if things are built out correctly, guess what? We're going to reduce the cost. And then we have that knowledge retention, because if I have those visual supports, I have something to reference back to. And I think what's most important, right, is we have a faster onboarding process. Whether you are a job coach, whether what your role is, or you're supporting a client being onboarded, if I have these visual supports, we can onboard them faster. And so a lot of times we fall into these learning barriers, all right? And we call this, the first one, we call it the squish. So learning objectives. How many times have you taken a training and you're like, what did I sign up for? This has nothing to do with the training. What is she saying, right? So, and that really happens when there's no clear, measurable learning objectives. So as you're training, as you're doing things, be really precise with what exactly are your learning goals and then build from there. The other thing is the no proof. So sometimes we do these trainings or we do, we build out these systems and models, but we never really prove, did they actually obtain that information? Do they understand? So sometimes we just throw them in. So we want to create activities that really require the participant to demonstrate, not just recall, but demonstrate and model if they fully understood the content. Then there's the vortex, which is, I think, probably the hardest for all of us. One, there's no incentive and there's no time to learn. We are so busy with our day-to-day. We're probably on this webinar, but also answering 20 emails, getting a phone call, wrapping up another report. We are just constantly in a vortex, right? So what we really want to do is create training content that's going to make your life easier. And I think that's what's really valuable about a lot of the things that we're going to share. It's to make your job easier, right? And so if it reduces my workload by embedding a lot of these supports in there, guess what? I'm more likely to do it. And then there's always the use it or lose it. So staff will easily forget the information or the skills if they're not often used. So making sure that when you're onboarding, when you're supporting your clients, that you're really following up on that continuous learning. So deliver training just as it's needed. All right, so that's kind of the theory behind it. I think why we fall into some of those pitfalls, but really understanding how are my trainings, how are my supports right now, and then how can I use those learning principles to kind of shift it. And I want you to shift it and start thinking about an onboarding process. And again, think for yourself. Like, think of your own personal experience as you've talked about onboarding, and then also for the clients that you're serving. So when we talk about the what if exercise, again, you can use the chat hand, you can think about it, what works for you. What if you had to onboard 3 new job coaches tomorrow, but your lead trainer is out for 2 weeks? Think about that. And I'm sure it's either happened, or I also get a giggle when they tell me a lead trainer, we're just kind of like, throw them to the wolves. All right. And then this is another really big issue for a lot of agencies. What if your onboarding materials, your supports, your systems live in someone's head? And it probably lives in your head, right? You're sitting there and you're like, I'm the person that all of this is in my head. And then what happens when I leave? And And that happens all the time. And when you leave, guess what? All the content, the programs, everything goes with it. So as an agency, there's such a hole when you have this high turnover because you're so people reliant rather than building out those systems and really creating those neuro-inclusive spaces. And I say neuro-inclusive because the reality is it's fixing the agencies so that then they can best support their clients. And there really is this cost of unprepared job coaches. So some of those challenges, and I want you to think of the agency, there's high staff turnover. There's that inconsistent service quality, right? So maybe one provider is just doing such a great job and then the other one is just not as consistent because there's no systems in place. Compliance or liability issues. A big one is that poor employer relationships. Sometimes we'll go to the employer and they're like, who's this person that keeps coming? And they don't even know what a job coach is. And so they're not building that relationship and rapport with their providers and the employer. And then there's low performance metrics. So when we don't have the high support and the built out correctly, you start to then see this trickle effect. If the agency is suffering, my job coaches are going to suffer. There's that lack of confidence and clarity. If I'm a new job coach coming in and I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing, how really effective am I? You become then reactive rather than proactive supports. So all we're kind of doing is putting out fires all day, and that's exhausting. So instead of exhausting myself, I'm using visual supports, I'm using those systems, and we'll give you tons of examples of what that looks like. But then it becomes proactive. We're teaching these skills rather than just reacting to them. And then again, that poor communication with your stakeholders. And as we know, it trickles then to our clients. So if the agency doesn't feel supported, your job coaches don't feel supported, how do I support my clients? Then we see that there's loss of job. There's that decreased independence. They're frustrated, and then, they're inconsistent with broken routines. So they don't have any systems in place. When you're not there, what do they do? And that's what we need to start thinking about. And so how do we really systematically train? First, we want to create a system. Think of your agency right now or where you're working. Do we really have role-specific visual manuals, not just a dusty binder with lots of protocols that make no sense, right? Do we have those broken down systems and processes in our own agencies? Is there an ability to job shadow and video model? Do we have that accessible to our new job coaches? And then having those regular refreshers and skills checks. We really want to make sure our checklists, our workflows, our SOPs are easy to update. They're shared across the team, and feedback loops for real-time improvement. Really making sure you're giving these visuals, these supports to those that are working in the field, and then changing them as necessary. And so when we set up visuals, we want to set up for scalability. This is really the crucial part. How do we scale what we're doing? Because there is only one of you. I know we probably wear so many hats, but what we want to do is create these visuals that are easy to apply. There's a living resource, and then you can implement that self-directed learning. So the first thing is really understanding processes, right? We want them to see visuals that are easy to apply. This was a really great example. We were working with a culinary program, and they had to take their ServSafe certification. No one knew how to log into their account. Everything was blocked. No one had passwords. They didn't know how to access it. We spent 30 minutes and everybody was so frustrated. Do you really think that they were going to do a great job on the exam? No. So, but if I had this, right, where do I start? What do I do? Building that task analysis. Now everyone was able to do this independently without that frustration. This makes it so much easier. We also want to use what's called a living resource or a bank of visuals. I love Padlet. If you've ever taken a training with me, you know that I will always talk about it. It's a very inexpensive kind of, think of it like a bulletin board where, I think it's great when all these agencies have these supports, but it's not great when no one knows how to access them. So if they're like, yeah, it's on a Google Drive, but it's floating in a cloud, that's not helpful. And so what I love about Padlets, and you can just look at padlet.com, you can store all your job aids. You can store your structured onboarding. So imagine if I'm supporting a client and he's working at a mechanic shop, he can scan a QR code and it's going to tell them, hey, this is what you need to wear to work. This is what your payroll looks like. Here's step-by-step of all the tasks that you need to do and maybe incorporate a video in there. Here's how, those pro-social behaviors. So we don't have to just focus on a work task. We can embed some of those behavioral expectations as well. Talk about proactive. Instead of me, okay, I got to pull this because he's really struggling. We're not going to let them struggle. And then guess what happens? Is it just my client that's using this? No. Employers love these systems because guess what? Then their staff starts to use it. And it becomes that universal design for learning. Also, what's really helpful, if I'm a job coach that's covering for someone, right? It happens. I can support this person without really knowing what we were supposed to be doing. It makes it easier. I think of like a substitute teacher that they can come in, lesson plans, everything is ready to go. You can use that QR code in different ways to make it discreet. They can access everything through their phone. And so it's just a very easy to use platform. And it's a living resource, and it's that bank of visuals. And then we really want to self-direct learning. It becomes very challenging as we're onboarding new staff to always physically be there or observing. So how are we just really building out self-directed learning? Because visuals don't just support learning, they really sustain it. So when individuals learn how to access and apply the visuals on their own, they really are going to rely from, move from relying on the supervisor, and now they're doing this independently. You can do this with your staff, and you can also do this with your adults that you're onboarding, those clients. And then what's really cool is, again, we're using those principles. They're testing their knowledge, right? They're scenario based. It's relevant to them. And then we are making sure, are we doing videos? Are they able to read and take notes? So we're really excited. We have launched a self-directed learning platform where you really could embed all of your learning materials, and then they're able to build that out. And most agencies have systems similar to it. And so as you're building out those new courses and things like that to train and support your staff and clients, you want to make sure there's an option for self-directed learning. All right, so we covered principles. We covered why it's important to use those visual supports, really the cost, and making sure that we're onboarding our job coaches effectively. I think as you can see, there's a lot of that visual supports. There's a lot of that self-directed learning. And then if you feel like, hey, we already have these things, really make sure, are they actually accessible? Are people knowing where it's located? All right, because that's always a big question for a lot of people. All right, so let's leverage technology. So I know I showed you a lot of pretty visuals, but there are things that you can do on your own. All right, so we utilize a lot of technology tools and AI tools to help us create these supports. But I don't want to overwhelm you. I think for some people, they're like, whoa, I could never build anything like that. And that's okay. You have to start somewhere. And it's okay to start on the low tech side. I remember starting with just like a choice board, drawing pictures, a checklist on a Post-it. Start somewhere. And then we move into, there's always those binders and those printed, all the way to using something that's high tech. So kind of try to identify, where am I now on embedding these supports and visuals to build those neuro-inclusive spaces? And then can we start to elevate it? All right, can we use some of these new tools to help us create those visual supports that are needed to onboard our clients and our job coaches? So there's always a starting point. So like I said, it's just better to start somewhere. And I remember being a teacher with zero budget and zero ability to make these things. And I used to use sticky notes with checklists and stars and all of those things. That's all right. You could start with that. Another amazing tool we all have at our disposal is our phones. Videotaping, taking pictures, making it simple but accessible. And then you can put them all together and say, hey, this is the video. I may not always be here, but let me build this video model so that you can reference back to it and then make it accessible. So that's really crucial. And then all the way from just kind of creating those first then boards and choice boards. So how many, and I'm sure many have heard of Canva. Canva is a wonderful tool. And I think for most people, if you guys have used Canva and you can use a chat, what have you used Canva for? And I think a lot of people either, like, they think of flyers, they think of social media. What have you guys used Canva for? Yes, invitations. A lot of people use them a lot for like, your own personal things too. So Canva is such a great tool. Yes, flyers, invitations, some training. Oh, resumes. Yes, visual aids, visual accommodations. Awesome, Marcos, Priscilla, perfect. So yes, pictorial resumes. It can be used for so many things, and there's a lot of really great templates. There is a free version. If you are going to use it a lot, I probably recommend you getting the subscription. Yes, worksheets too. It's just such a great tool. And so you can use it for those task analysis. Yes, presentations. This was made on Canva. And it makes it so much easier and visually based than using like a PowerPoint. We've created workbooks with it. We've created curriculum presentations. So utilizing a lot of the visual supports that Canva has available to you. We also do a lot of checklists and processes on Canva, and Canva has now created a lot of their AI tools where you can do video demos. So creating those videos on your phone, plugging them in, and you can kind of merge them, and they're very easy to edit. You can add voiceovers. So it's just a very robust tool that it's hard to kind of get familiar with. There's a lot of great YouTube videos that you can familiarize yourself with how to build things, but start with templates and then plugging in your pictures. So we utilize it a lot to create our visual supports and our presentations and things like that. We also really like Synthesia. So if you follow us on Instagram, we do post a lot of micro learning. You can put your videos in there. You could do voiceovers. You could do AI mode. So these are really great for just kind of creating micro learning video instructions, whether you want to practice customer service, interview skills, common clerical things, problem solving, asking for help. That's a really great way to just incorporate some of those video tools. Again, these are the higher end kind of what we're using, but most of these will have a free subscription to it. And then if you really like the platform, then you can always pay for it. And then here's the list, right? AI, like I said, is kind of everywhere. And it can be very overwhelming to just try to navigate what are those tools and start small. I'm sure most of you probably are familiar with ChatGPT. It's a great way to kind of help us. Let's say we want to build a resume, or we want to build or help me write an email that my communication's just not there. Great tools to kind of utilize to help us with some of the communication. Claude, I love for curriculum building. So if you're not familiar with that, Gemini does great photos. There's Jasper, there's Copy. Every week, I feel like I get another list of AI tools. These are just some of the tools that we do use or have used that's been really helpful in creating some of those visual supports. So you're not alone, right? You can move from the sticky notes to kind of Canva to incorporating the AI to elevate some of the visual supports that you're going to use to incorporate within the job sites. Again, this is great for, think back, your onboarding tools. Use some of these things to say, hey, how do I create this system? And sometimes it's stuck in our head and we just kind of need a little help getting it out. That's what I like this for. It's not a replacement. It's kind of like a colleague, right? Like, hey, I got to brainstorm some ideas. Can you kind of help me make it sound a little bit better? And then you can really look up, like, what are some of those good prompts to give it so that you have clearer, concise information that it's giving you. Anyone has ever used any other AI tool? If you want to drop that in, and you can share it with the group, some of the AI tools that have been useful to you, please feel free to share that as well. Again, there's a ton. So kind of going back to the Padlet that I was sharing earlier, this is another really great tool that we use. We build this with pre-employment curriculum training. So when we work with agencies to build out your curriculum support, whether that's pre-employment, industry certification programs, what I love about just hosting it on a Padlet, and no, Padlet is not going to have your visuals. Think of it as like a blank board, and then you can upload videos and presentations on it, and then you can share it. I think Nearpod's like another one that you can use. But what I like about it too is, one, your adults can access these. So let's say they're on the job site, they can scan a QR code and they can have access. But if also I'm running a program and there's presentations and things like that, you can share this among staff members as well as you build out the program. Okay. So again, great tool. I'll make sure to put that in the chat later, but for you to just be able to really have it more interactive. Again, you could put documents, videos, recordings, and things like that. And then you can kind of go through this whole extreme where you can even build your own innovation hub, where you can incorporate all those visual systems directly into onboarding and workplace learning, really wanting to make sure you create interactive tasks, guides, visual modules, manuals, and then really integrate self-paced micro learning. So we all have the attention span of like a fly these days, right? So if it's very hard to capture people's attention. Sometimes we don't have an hour to learn. So maybe even doing these 20-minute trainings that I can kind of squeeze in during my busy workday. So you can integrate some of those self-paced modules into your into your learning hub. And really what it does is it reinforces programs, routines, workflows. They're ready to use visual templates. So there is a difference, right? There's a big difference when I take a training that is just like all text versus, okay, I could see it, right? I'm going through scenarios. I'm really applying what I'm doing, and now I can now apply that in the workplace. I can apply that. And this is really great for not only us, I think, as professionals. Yes, thank you, Denise, on your pod. Not only us as professionals, but for our clients, right? If our clients we can do these scenarios, we can really practice this self-directed learning, we can better equip when they're on the job site. All right, so let's talk a little bit about natural supports and how do we utilize them with visuals. So natural supports for clients and our customers, most of us know those natural supports are those people, routines, and the tools that are already there in the workplace. And I always think of like, go to the grocery store. I love Publix, right? You get a good Publix sandwich. But when I go to Publix and I go to a different Publix that's not my Publix, I'm like instantly anxious because I don't know where anything is. And so I have to rely on kind of those visual signage, the labels, the staff to help me navigate my environment. And that's going to be new for everybody. So as we're onboarding our clients, we have to really think of and identify who are those natural supports, and then how do we embed those visuals to really create that inclusive space. And so first of all, we want to look at our coworkers. So providing reminders or task cues. And what's really great about having these visual supports and these systems in place is you now empower the coworkers that are now working with your clients. Think about it. You're not there all the time. And they may not have the skills or not know exactly how to best support your client. And so now we're empowering them. Hey, you can use this checklist. You can prompt this way without making them feel uncomfortable because they're not sure how to give the feedback. And then they wait so long that our clients are really struggling for no reason. Think of a visual checklist, right? So maybe we can even identify, do they already have some of those visuals using Instacart or different apps to create the visuals? And then use existing signage and label. So every environment that you work with, identify first who are those natural supports or what are those natural supports. And now we're going to build the visuals around that. So kind of embedding supports in your agency. First thing is embed those natural supports into your training. So help identify what are those natural supports in the job. Create peer-to-peer checklists. This is such a great tool when job sites have this because it really can break down using their real job tools. Utilize all those tools that we gave you, right? Utilize Canva, utilize some of those AI tools, whether it's live, like ChatGPT, Canva, Guide is another one. And that's going to help you create those scalable visuals. It's going to be very challenging to embed all of these things at once. So, start with one task at a time. And then you want to build your visual bank. So typically we use Padlet to then house all of these visuals to make sure that it's accessible across the site, whether it's across job coaches or across the clients and the workplace as well. And then really what I love is making visuals part of the culture. A lot of our adults might feel embarrassed to ask for accommodations. So I want you to think not just on onboarding, but ongoing support. We are only there for this amount of time. And so if we are not there to build out the systems, we're really setting them up for failure. we set ourselves up for failure, right? So we really want to make sure that, are they really relying on us, or are they relying on the tools that we're building them? And that's what I really want you guys to all do, is how much are they relying on me, either as a job coach, as a counselor, or any role that I am? What I really need to be doing is teaching them how to utilize these supports. All right. Because if we can learn how to utilize those supports, not only are they going to start using it, like I said, other employees start to use it as well. And you might not knowing or supporting other employees that are there that might not be so blessed to have the supports, or have not disclosed their diagnosis. So it just becomes where everybody is using it. It's part of the work culture. And so let's look at the types of visuals that we can start to build. And so I want you to think of the workplaces that you work with. Think of your own workplace, right? That you wish you had some of these things. And so the first thing is called a static visual. These are the non-moving still image or graphics. So these are really great for information, instruction, or expectation that then stays consistent. So let's kind of look at this kitchen, right? If we're learning and they're making a recipe, it's something that's repetitive and the same, we might have a visual that's right there in front of them, or a checklist to really work on some of those hygiene skills, or how to mix, right? So these are things that are just embedded within the environment. They're still, and then this is typically the most common what we would start with. So start with those static visuals. All right, thinking of your dynamic visuals. So think of this workplace, right? We're back in the mechanic shop. And these are really great because these are the moving or changing visual supports that show what a behavior or a task looks like in motion. So it really helps the participant kind of connect that abstract concept to a concrete example. This is great for visual checklists of supplies, so how to complete those tasks, step-by-step instruction. This is where those phones become handy, right? We don't need anything fancy, but you as a job coach can really model what the task is, and now they have something to reference back to. And then this is also really great for those social and behavioral expectations. What's really hard about social expectations in the workplace is they change from work site to work site. The way you're going to probably dress and behave in a mechanic shop might be very different than in an office setting. And so it's very hard to sometimes generalize those skills. So we can use some videos, we can use different photos, checklists, things like that to really help with learning those skills as well. And then there's those interactive visuals. So these are visual supports that require active participation, choice making, or engagement. So these are awesome, especially for customer service. So when you're forward facing customers, you've got scripts that they can work on. There's maybe a full menu or a visual menu that they'll be able to engage with the clients if they don't have the full, ability to communicate fully. The POS system, that's another one. And then closing procedures. So really seeing it embedded within a job site, how it could look. And again, this is not these like huge, visual step by step. They could be embedded. It looks more natural, but it really helps them with navigating their workspace. And then we look at environmental visuals, right? So these are the visual supports that are embedded directly into the physical space to kind of help them understand how to navigate the environment. So if we're looking at, we're learning how to do laundry, right? Where's the detergent? Where's the colors? Are we labeling things to make it a little bit easier for our clients to navigate their environment? If they check out, where do they check out? So those visuals could be put in place. And then as you can kind of see, there's transition cues. That's another big one. Hey, when you hear the beep, then you're going to move to this next spot. So how are we transitioning even within our workspace and embedding all of that within that day-to-day? So a lot of the times, we ask ourselves, what is kind of the hesitation? What is our hesitation to start all these things? And I typically hear, oh, I'm so busy. I cannot make and laminate and do all these things. I have too many things that are on my plate. And that's a real concern. Another one is we don't have the budget for this, and we'll go into that. And then there's that uncertainty where you're like, I have no idea even how to start or where to start. And so I think those are our three big challenges as we look into how do we create these kind of real, true neuro-inclusive spaces that really everyone can navigate the environment. And I'm sure you're thinking already, like, man, this could be really helpful for me, either as a job coach, as as a provider, or whatever your role is. Imagine if you had these systems in place, how much better could you support your clients or support, the role that you do? And there's a real cost, right? So there is a challenge when we look at the business side of it, when we don't have those systems and those visual supports. We know that people will spend 200 to 300 times more time spent on verbal instruction and repetition. Think about your day. How many times do you repeat yourself over and over again with the same instructions? That is as per my last email, that's what you like to text. Think of that. How much time am I spending repeating myself and giving the same instructions? So you've increased 200 to 300%. It takes 40 to 60% longer without visual reference guides. So talk about onboarding and talking about support. If it's taking me 40 to 60% longer to truly understand the task, we could have fixed that with a visual. And we also know that $3,000 to $5,000 per entry-level position replacement. When there's turnover, it costs an average of a company about $5,000 to hire. And this is an entry-level position. I'm not talking about a higher-end position. And so how much money are we spending on turnover, on our clients losing their jobs because they don't have the right supports? How much time is being spent saying the same things over and over again? And how much longer is it taking without those visual supports? So there's a true cost to it, right? And we know that a visual system can cost as little as $500 to $2,000 to create those systems. But look how much I'm saving, right? It can save you $15,000 to $30,000 annually in reduced support hours, turnover, and increased productivity. So when we're talking to businesses or when we're talking to our employer partners, really showcasing, hey, there's a real profit in having these systems in place. And I want to think about the families, right? So as a family member, and I think of my own kids, I think of my own husband, right? What are the challenges without systems? I'm spending 1 to 3 hours per day giving the same reminders, instructions. I don't know how many times I can tell you that I tell my kids, put the backpacks here, and it's always flown everywhere. Think of that in your own home. And really understanding that your interactions just become so transactional and there's a strain on the relationship. And there's a real sibling impact as well. So other children are receiving less attention to support demands. And so we look at, as we break it down, families are spending 10 to 20 hours, per week on tasks that visual systems could reduce 2 to 3 hours. So yes, after this training, I'm going to create a backpack sign where everyone's going to go put their things. So if I had visual supports, I wouldn't have to repeat myself so much, even in my own home. And then I want you to think about the individual, right? So think of the individual that we're supporting. There's a true challenge without systems. When I don't have a system in place, and let's think of the individual, but think of yourself, right? As you're doing a job, as you're doing a task. There is 100% mental overload. So all the energy is going to remembering the steps. All the energy is going to figure out, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? And then there's that anxiety drain. So I'm constantly worried about forgetting or doing a mistake. And then that independence feels out of reach because I am so reliant on my job coach, on my supervisor, on my coworker to help me get through the day. And now I have that lack of autonomy, right? And so I think that's really, there are some true challenges without having those systems in place. And we really have, if we look at the upside of it, they have the same potential as anyone else, but pay a daily price because their environment doesn't support how their brain works. Go back to that first activity. If I give you all this text to fix this Rubik cube, there's a chance you probably won't do it. Or it's going to take you a lot longer to do it than if I gave you a visual checklist, if I gave you a video demonstration, if I modeled it for you. And so we really want to understand if we're really building truly neuro-inclusive practices in workplaces, it starts with building things so the way people learn. We don't have a tendency to do that. We typically use a lot of verbal prompts. Sometimes I go and there's, job coaches and they're just using verbal. But when you leave, that verbal is gone. So what happens, right? And so then they don't do the task. And so I really want, if you want to test it out, go a day and don't say anything and see how they're navigating their environment. And whenever they get stuck, that's where a visual needs to be in place. So kind of test it out, get that baseline in your space as you're supporting your clients. And this can be from just navigating their work environment, but also just filling out forms. I think of VR, I think of APD. It's so hard to navigate these systems. It's very confusing. But if I had these visual step-by-step guides, if I did all of these things, it would make it much easier. I can become more independent and not so reliant on the agency and the job coach. All right, we covered a lot, right? So we covered our learning theories. We talked about that onboarding process. We gave you some really good AI tools that you can do to incorporate your visual supports. And we really showed kind of the cost of what it is when we don't have it. And so a lot of you are really interested in, expanding our agencies. So as we hire new coaches, as we open up new offices, which is the goal, right, to provide more support, we have to understand that when growth outpaces readiness, there are some serious challenges to it. So a lot of the times is that inconsistent service delivery. So new sites may struggle to maintain fidelity, right? We're like, man, this is working. We're doing such a great job. We're ready to open up a new office. But it works because all the systems are in everybody's brain and everybody knows that system. But when we open a new office, guess what happens? No one knows what's in your brain. They can't read minds. We wish we could sometimes. But so there's that inconsistent service delivery, and those new sites are really struggling because there's just nothing in place. There's also that insufficient staff support or supervision. So coaches in your region may feel isolated, right? You had all this support, everything was running great, but now because there's that lack of support and systems, we feel really kind of that unsupported regional leadership or mentorship that people crave. And then there's, of course, those operational gaps. So lack of systems, either for scheduling, case management, documentation, communication, it really just leads to disorganization and service delays. So think of, hey, I worked in this one office and then I went to another office and it is not the same, right? That's what happens. And so because what's going on is you're growing without actually setting all these systems in place first. That has to happen first before you can expand. And what we really do know is that organizations with standardized training materials and tools, they are 50% more likely to scale successfully across new sites. You got to build your toolbox. Where is your toolbox? So think of you as an employer. What tools do you have? Right? What can you implement? And if you don't have those tools, sit down with your supervisors, or if you're the supervisor, you're like, oh, we need these things. You guys have to sit down and really carve out and pull from the brain into some kind of visual support system. Because if I have this as a staff member, I am better equipped to serve my clients and then create these same systems where they're working. All right. And so really scaling again with clarity. So the impact of visual tools, we know it ensures consistency across locations. So it's very easy to follow that step-by-step guide. We know that it's going to speed up your onboarding and training. So whether you're onboarding new agent, new counselors or new job coaches within it, but also it speeds up onboarding and training for your client. If I have these systems and we're teaching these systems, you can fade out a lot faster and they become more independent. And then that there enhances service quality for clients. So we really want to make sure, are we really providing that high quality? Is there a fidelity checklist that we can go off to make sure we're all doing the same thing? It also will improve your internal communication, and it improves the supervisor performance evals. I think feedback and performance is huge, because if you're not following a system and you're not doing a good job, there's no system, right? There's no way to give feedback if I'm really unsure what my job and what my role is. And so if I have these structured systems in place, if I have these evaluations, guess what? Now, as a supervisor, I can give you direct feedback on specific steps so that you can better improve. And now we're getting, much more higher quality. You can also scale efficiently with fewer errors. I go back to that. I asked 5 people to show me how to scan a document, and all 5 showed me a totally different process. So we really want to make sure, are we teaching the right way how to do the job? And those visuals will really help you. And then really reinforce your agency brand and mission. So every VR, every job coach agency or every different office has kind of that different flair. And this is an opportunity for you to be able to really showcase what makes you different. And then supports your job coach's learning style. I sometimes think we miss out that we're so busy supporting these clients that we're not supporting our staff. So whether you're a VR counselor, whether you're a job coach, I want you to think back of like, hey, what supports do you have? What training materials are you using that's really helping you do a better job? Or are you just kind of like flown in there and say, hey, best of luck? Think of what it could do if you have those support systems so that you can better support, again, your clients. All right, I know I finished early, which I'm sure no one's going to complain about, but I would love to open, because I know with Webit, I like to make it interactive, but I would love to open it up and connect with all of you for questions, comments, and then see if you guys need any more additional help with some of those tools.
So if you're interested in asking a question, if you raise your hand, I will unmute you and allow you to turn your camera on.
I'm also going to put on here, there's a QR code there. If you want to just connect and brainstorm, we do offer free 30-minute consultations where you'll be able to just connect with our team and our designers, and we'll be happy to just kind of explore ways and different tools that your agencies can use to better support these strategies. Or was I so good that I answered everybody's questions and it was just so amazing? No?
You were amazing.
I think I did get a clap. So I know I don't like not seeing you guys. I know you're all hiding behind there. Yes, I did cover a lot. So I never get, I'm like, I don't get the feedback. But like I said, guys, if you want a copy of the presentation, feel free to send me an email. My email is there, sgill@neuro-cs.com. Again, really our role is to help agencies and providers build out these systems. I know sometimes we just don't have the time. So if you need any support on that, we're happy to share some information. You're welcome.
Well, it looks like we don't have very many questions for you whatsoever. I am glad that you presented this topic because it's something that can be used not only with individuals with varying disabilities, but it can be used in almost any setting in which you're training someone to do something that's different for them. And it has a tracking system, so then they can bring things to their remembrance easier than you having to take time off from doing one thing, travel, and go train them to do this thing over and over and over again. So they have a visual reminder. And as you said in the presentation, for those who are neurodivergent, it is especially useful because we know that they have executive function issues, and when they're nervous, or the mood has changed in the environment, or there are other stressors going on, such as sensory processing or hyperactivity for sensory things, then they tend to forget the stuff that's in rote memory. And so this will bring that to their remembrance. And so I really appreciate you presenting on this topic very, very much. And so I'd like to thank you again. and I'd like to get our individuals to complete our survey. And I'm not going to promise that this link will work and give you the certificate at the end no more because Microsoft has been going through some stuff. But you should get a link to the certificate as soon as you hit enter. But don't worry because I'll be sending out an email with the attachments for all those who complete the survey and for all of those who um, attended, you'll at least get the survey link. And if you take the survey ahead of time, you'll get the survey link and the attachments as well. So thank you all for joining us today. And I truly appreciate you being here and joining us. And for those who had registered for the original presentation schedule for today, it has been rescheduled for March 6th. And the registration is open, and you can check out our registration page on FCIC.org, and you'll get the registration link for that one as well. You can start signing up for it, and then check us out before Christmas. We will be putting up the information for our January webinar, which will be on IDD, mental health, and employment. So that should be a great topic, and I look forward to sharing that topic with you all. And I hope that you all have a great holiday season, as it is going to start beginning soon, which means this year will be ending very quickly. So thank you for your continued support for the FCIC webinars. FLAPSE also has webinars that we're doing in conjunction together. And then, as you saw in the opening slides, there is a summit that's coming up in February, and it will be in St. Augustine. So we hope that you can join us. And I'll also be presenting at the CARD conference in January on Employment First and ways to support teachers with resources on how they can implement work skills from K through 12. So check us out and have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Please visit our website for more information about our programs, projects, and how you can get involved.